delivering. So because if you're communicating science to another scientist.
And that's a very dangerous zone because you need also to ensure.
And I was like, okay, mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. I was like, yes, now I remember, and it clicks.
Have in the same audience little kids and adults and expect that you will.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of ThinkPod, brought to you by Helsinki Think Company, the entrepreneurship society of the University of Helsinki. My name is Yemi Butterman, and I'll be your host. Today, we are going to be delving into the realms of scientific knowledge and the public to unravel the intriguing facets between science and communication. Joining me today in the studio are two scientists. Both are researchers at the University of Helsinki who have been deeply involved in the science communication project that is ongoing at the Science Basement Organization of the University of Helsinki. I am joined by Dr. Eleanna Asvestari and Anastasiia Marmyleva. Welcome to ThinkPod today.
Hi, and thank you for having us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Right. We are happy to have you here to be discussing some of the topics that we are curious about, especially at a time where science seems to be the in thing. I mean, it helps us to kind of like understand the world better. And many of us are usually interested in, okay, how best can scientists kind of like carry the public along in how they express their research works or communicate some of the findings that they have. So first of all, I want to start by asking you, because I know it's been your mission anyway. So why science and communication, at least for both of you? And how did you both even get involved in the science communication project? If maybe Eleanna could start with that.
Sure, yeah. Well, for me, I think it was a bit of an easy choice, mainly considering that I anyway love talking about research and about the things I'm doing. It's not that I'm too full of myself, although some people may think that for sure. No, it's more like I really enjoy sharing the knowledge I gain. And it was very important at some point in my career when I noticed the gap between the scientific world and the public to find ways to bridge it. Because it's one thing to go and talk about the research you do, and it's another thing to engage with the public and ensure they understand and they see the value in what you are doing. So the more I started talking about my research, the more I realized I need to find effective ways to broaden the audience to whom I'm talking and also the means with which I'm doing it.
Right.
So I think
Is that the same for you also, Anastasiia?
I think I'm always an outlier, to be honest, because our listeners from the podcast already know the story of how I came into science, and it wasn't really planned from the start. And I would say with the science communication, it's somewhat similar, because I didn't plan specifically science communication. What really brought me in there was the love for podcasts. And actually that was my first motivation. So I noticed that there was this organization called the Science Basement that has a podcast on their own. And then I decided what a best way to combine the things I know with the things I'd like to learn. And that sort of developed into something, what I'm doing now.
Well, this is really interesting, the idea of like combining what you know with what you're curious to learn. And I think that's probably what brought many of us, to this point, because we realize that life is just, a daily lesson. You keep learning every day about new things. And I think it helps us to sort of like modify our missions, in different ways. You could start from art and then you find yourself doing something more kind of like technical in a way, or you could start from science and you want to kind of like delve into the creator's economy in many ways. I want to ask you, this is one question that I kind of like ask people that I meet. What is your mission?
That's a very, very difficult question to answer. I think my mission would be, first and foremost, to answer many questions we might have about how the sun affects us, because I study the sun. And at the same time, because I grew up in a society that was a little bit patriarchal, I wanted to become a role model in the scientific world for the other female people who are coming into academia and they want someone to look up for. So it's not that I will have one mission, it's more that there are many different things I would like to provide or reach. And so they kind of associate a little bit with each other.
That's empowering, really. Yeah. What about you, Anastasiia?
Yeah, you are asking very difficult questions. I don't have like just one answer to that. It also is based on the projects that we have within the podcast itself. So I would say it's like twofold. So on the one hand side is the importance to give voice to other scientists and specifically to the young career researchers because, well, first of all, they're lacking the confidence most of the times. And giving them this more flexible opportunity and the support, we are boosting their confidence. But at the same time, they're getting all the important skills for themselves to understand their own science, to get some new acquaintances, get recognition, and all those layers. But because we also have a spin-off series on our podcast, it's also adds to the academia itself because it's a very big brewing pot with many different factors and problems involved. And so we both think that, I'm sorry, I'm speaking also on your behalf, but we talked about these things, is that it's important to point them out and it's important to speak for those people who maybe are afraid also to speak and to outline things that are usually left between the lines or just in the shadow.
Right.
That's a very interesting take because when I heard first the question, I thought of like my own mission in terms of like why am I doing the science and how I ended up in academia. But you're correct in terms of like why we do the podcasting science communication. Right. It's to give voice to the others. And lately we started with Anastasiia the spin-off series within the Science Basement podcast, which focuses more on talking about the different, let's say, not problems, but obstacles or mountains we have to climb in the academic world and put that out there in record so that people know that it's not everything is easy and things flow.
It's not all sunshine and butterflies.
We also have hardships. So
right. And I think we're going to get to those hardships later. But first of all, let's kind of like look into, because I know that I've listened to a couple of your podcasts and I see that you interview both junior researchers and senior researchers who are working in the science community. I want to ask, what has been your experience in the field with them, especially are there kind of like stories that stuck with you or experiences that you like to share interviewing these people? What are the lessons that you probably have been able to learn from?
I think it's a learning experience for both the parties.
Right.
I think we learn together with them.
Absolutely.
It's definitely a journey that we're taking all together.
Yes. I think it's very interesting how, regardless of whether we spoke with senior people or, let's say, interviewed senior people or early career scientists, because they brought in so many different fields of research, we did learn a lot with them, not only about their science, but also about the process of trying to explain that field of research in a way that is understood. For example, if they come from biology, that this is understood by me, who doesn't have any background in biology, and it's not always easy. And it's an experience of how to simplify science, but also on learning all the different fields of research that are out there and why they are all so important.
Okay, speaking of importance, really, I want to ask, like, why is, in your own view, why is communicating science in such a clear, effective way, why is it essential? Like, why is it important? And how does that even contribute to the advancement of the society, as we want to see a better society? We want to see a reduction in miscommunication and misunderstandings, and to communicate things better. But how essential is science communication to that?
Well, I would say this: for a very long time, the concept of a scientist was a person that was inside a lab or in a little room, like in front of their computers or in front of an instrument, and they do their own thing. And that didn't matter for the rest of the world. It was a very detached world. And by getting ourselves out there and start talking about the work we are doing, how it impacts society and our lives, and why it matters, not only it brings knowledge to the world that is outside the research community, but it also show the importance of the work we are doing and why it's important for us to keep on being funded, let's say, to continue doing that work. Because how do you justify the taxpayers giving funding for research if they don't see the benefit in it? And so by being very detached from the outside world, it's the knowledge doesn't go through, or at least not properly, and the value of research is not seen, in my opinion.
I agree, absolutely. And I would say, maybe it's controversial, I don't know, but it should be part of our job description, because eventually most of the support that comes to us comes from the public money, and it's just fair that we also show what we actually are doing and what we are delivering to the community through our work. Another layer to this, I'd say, is just our personal training in understanding our own work. Because I think it was Huxley who said this, it's not a quote, of course, that if a person is able to put their work into simple terms and digest this in a simple way, that they will have more understanding of what they're actually doing. And I completely agree with that one.
That's true, yeah. And I think another thing that came to my mind, and it should have been probably the first thing that should come to my mind, but anyways, is that, as I said, because we are a little bit isolated from the outside world and living in our little universe or bubble, however one wants to say it, is that we lose our human side, in the sense that we are, as I said before, we are detached from the community, and then it's the question of, like, why would we believe these people we don't know? They just say they're in a lab doing something, but why is that something we should trust?
Yeah.
So if we don't put ourselves out there, and if we don't show that we are humans who care about our fellow society, then why would people listen to us? And we have seen the impact of that in many important fields of research, whether it's climate change, medicine. If you don't get yourself out there so that the people become familiar with you and connect with you, then why would you expect they will listen to you?
Right. And I think one of the beautiful ways, one of the good things that happens when you kind of like take yourself away from that sort of like a bubble into sort of real world experiences, then you promote some sort of trust building with the public, because then they get to see you, they get to hear about your findings, they get to see your work, and they get to kind of like connect on the, like you said, the human level in many ways. I'm kind of like beginning to think that those are some of the challenges you must have kind of like been encountering along this journey of like communicating science, because I really want to get into those challenges. What are some of the, and I'm going to start with Anastasiia this time around, like what are some of the challenges that you have encountered along this science and communication journey?
Can I just also add to the previous one?
Please do.
It just came to my mind, like as you were talking, that it also provides the option for discussion.
Yes.
And because especially for the controversial topics, and I'm coming from the medicine part of science, a lot of stuff that is coming out and some findings are so raw, and there are also scientists just going and presenting their data as if it's already an established fact. So a lot of the modern findings need to be taken with a grain of salt, and it may not necessarily come out very intuitively. And also as Eleanna said, that for a long time scientists were considered like some big brain heads, you know? Like, okay, well, in some ways, yes. It's just to remember that scientists can also be wrong, and it's okay to ask questions about our work, and as long as you know the sources where to search for, and communicating with us as well. And I think science communication offers this sort of platform to actually be able to meet with the scientists and ask these questions, like, I read it somewhere.
Right.
Is this true? Like, can you please explain to me? So in this way, it's also very important to do science communication.
Right. It's about conversations. It's about the trust. It's about kind of like having a platform to spark new ideas. And I mean, it's always fascinating every day, every time you kind of like just stumble on something and they're like, oh, this is the new solution in town to some of our wicked problems. But you kind of like also trying to understand how it starts from idea and then being transformed into action, and then from action into real world solutions and all of that. So I'm asking the question on the challenges.
Yes.
And I know that these challenges can be seen in like two ways, because how you talk with other scientists, of course, will be different from how you talk to someone who is not from the scientific community. So I'm kind of like wondering, what are the challenges that you probably have encountered in some of the misconceptions you've probably have experienced with science communication to non-experts, people from outside of the scientific community. Yeah.
As you mentioned just now, is the audience, and knowing your audience, because it will largely dictate how you're going to approach the science communication, which words you're going to select, and what would be the main message for your deliverance. So because if you're communicating science to another scientist, and that also is actually a part of the science communication, then you can use probably all the jargon you want, if it's especially a fellow from the same field. At the same time, if you're talking to a child, it's going to be completely different. It's going to be probably fewer facts, more of the basic facts, and the language is going to be absolutely different. So that is one of the difficult tasks, is to identify who are you going to talk to, and selecting the correct terminology and the correct way of speaking to allow the person you're talking to understand what you're trying to say, without also losing the proper context and the trustworthiness of what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to ask Eleanna this question that is on my mind.
Go ahead. I'm prepared.
But still on the challenges, sort of in a way. I'm kind of like thinking of the complex scientific terms. Like, how do you address? Because I know that I'm always interested in scientific findings. Sometimes I'm like on, the university portal and just reading some of these findings, and I'm always interested in, okay, they found this. Okay, this is the new research in town and all that. But I also kind of like struggle through it because you come across a lot of what you would term jargons, which you kind of like get confused and lost in between. So how do you address these complex scientific terms in such a way that, it will make it understandable to the broader audience?
So I would agree, of course, with what Anastasiia said, that the vocabulary you use needs to be adjusted based on the audience you have. And it's true that depending on the background of your audience, you might have to oversimplify some things. And that's a very dangerous zone, because you need also to ensure that what you are simplifying is also making sense, and you don't you don't up saying something incorrect. Probably the best way to communicate science and to overcome these issues is by thinking in the everyday life of the people you are talking to, and try to see if there is an example they are very familiar with and they can visualize, and this will give them an image in their head of the concept you are trying to explain to them, because many things in research can be described through parallelism. So it's always important to try and think of everyday examples that will build the same image as the scientific concept you want to say. Of course, that doesn't apply to everything. It's not something you can do with every research topic, but it's a good way to go. And then also the convincing part, I think, is a challenge we have in science communication. And to convince your audience, you don't just need to state the facts, because scientists, when they go out and they state the facts, they expect that should be enough for the people to believe in them and understand or accept what they are saying.
And it's not enough.
It's not enough. We have seen, and there has been research done that shows that just stating the facts doesn't help. You often have to speak to emotion, especially if you're talking about topics that have a very strong impact. And you need to speak to the emotion of people, and you also need to make it relatable to them.
Right. Anastasiia, if you want to communicate to a broader audience on science-related issues, what sort of strategies and methods do you find valuable that you use to provide that effective sort of communication?
So we're going to the coaching part of this, right?
Kind of.
Yes. Well, I would agree with Eleanna here that metaphors, it's one of the strongest parts you can use, like in your arsenal of tools for science communication. It's one of the best ways to make it relatable, indeed. And the other thing I would say, think of a story. And in the science basement, this is one of the things we always teach. Think of a story, because it provides the logic that you're seeking. It engages the audience with the material that you're trying to provide. And it is exactly what you imagine a story to be. It's like it has the beginning with introduction, it has the rise in action, the climax, everything, all those things apply. And it is very creative too, because you need to actually start thinking, okay, how do I put all these numbers or all these graphs from my manuscript into some interesting context of action and creating characters out of the things that I study. And I would say that's how you can start.
Right. I think I also agree with you. Stories are powerful. They've always, I think it's our oldest and traditional means of really communicating with people, because in that way, you are able to create necessary images, and not images that are confusing, but images that people can actually connect to, and then they can see what you're trying to make them understand in that way. And I think it's an effective strategy that I myself would agree with.
I would say also it's layering the information. So it's not that you're just introducing all the background at once, because it's important to introduce one thing at a time. So if the topic is very complex and you don't always want to oversimplify things, that can be a very useful tool for you to just like bit by bit, step by step, to start bringing things, and people will learn, and by the end of it they'll understand a very big complexity of the topic.
Eleanna, let's talk about the different set of audiences that we have. I, for one, believe that science communication can reach a broader audience, various audiences, different diverse sort of groups, from children to policymakers and academics, entrepreneurs, all kinds of people who can benefit from science communication. But I also kind of understand that in doing that, you will probably have to use diverse tools in order to reach this sort of audience. So I want to ask, how do you, from your own angle of science communication, how do you tailor your approach to these different groups?
That is a very good question. I think, first and foremost, you need a strategy for promoting the science communication activity you want to do, and that strategy should target different groups. Because if you want to talk to children about research, then you will convey different messages or focus on different things versus if you were talking to policymakers. And so depending on whom you want to address, you will consider different visuals, different vocabulary, as we said earlier, but also the promotion campaign for the event or the science communication activity you have in mind, whether it is a podcast episode we recorded or going on stage and having a guest scientist talking about the research. You need to think of how would you advertise it to attract those people you want to attract. Because we always say, we want to do science communication to a broad audience, but that's very general word as well. World and word. It's what does it mean? What is broad audience? Because you can't have in the same audience little kids and adults and expect that you will present the same thing in the same way and it will keep both parties happy. So it's more you first define a very narrow target audience, and then if you want to approach different groups, then you have to probably approach them in different ways and convey the science message in different ways to ensure that you reach this broad audience.
Right. And I think this is also a point where listening is also very, very important, listening to the audience that you're trying to communicate with. Because one thing that I also kind of find, and this is just my opinion, of the fact that most times there is this breakdown of listening between the information that is coming from there and the audience, because different people have different sort of needs. And if we don't understand the needs of the people and how they expect to be talked to in a way that they can get it, it might pose some sort of challenges, to some of the works. I'm thinking of balancing accuracy and accessibility now? And that's the question I want to get to Anastasiia.
Accessibility and
accuracy of information. Like, how do we make science communication accessible to people without compromising the accuracy of the information that we're getting?
Well, that links a bit to what I said earlier about the layering the information. So if you do have a complex topic, it's good to introduce the basics first. So there, of course, you start using all the metaphors and stories. So that can be one thing. And then don't be afraid to just digest things. It's not like you're looking down upon your audience, because you don't always assume what they know or don't know. So it's good to explain things even if they know them already, and that would put you sort of on the same page, I would say. Because sometimes I heard from some scientists it's just don't think that everybody is gonna know this or know that. So you need to know which things you need to explain. For example, I don't need to explain what sun is, right? So that is already accessible.
Well, it depends, because what people know what sun is versus what you want to tell to them about the sun in terms of science is different. But it's also because you can use their knowledge of the sun as an anchor to engage them in the message you're trying to convey about the science side of the sun. So, and it's important what you said, you shouldn't take for granted that people will know something because, we learned it at school. I mean, school was years ago for most of us. I remember I finished high school 18 years ago. I don't remember everything I learned in biology or chemistry in high school. So I don't mind someone telling me something if I know it or they think I know it. So
I like to sometimes, I know I have this bad habit. I shouldn't be probably always introducing mitochondria as the powerhouse of the cell. But I just noticed that when I say what mitochondria, they make energy for the cell, they're batteries. And it sort of is I think I've heard something. And then I was okay, mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. I was yes, now I remember. And it clicks. So in a way, maybe using some of these catchphrases is not even a bad thing.
Yeah. I mean, not everybody would remember that.
Yeah. So. And do you think the reason why everybody doesn't remember that, do you think it's because, and I'm still talking about trying to strike a balance now, do you think some people are kind of so focused on ensuring, on maintaining scientific accuracy over ensuring that these messages get to a wider audience?
Not really. I think our brain works in a way that it absorbs a lot of information in, but then it will maintain on the surface, let's say, the most accessible information, the things that we need on an everyday basis. So people might tend to forget things they heard years ago because they didn't have the need in the in-between time for that. To be honest, if you are interested also in a topic, there's so much information that you can go and start building the basics to even understand the science. So it's not that the information itself is not accessible.
Mm-hmm.
I think also very often scientists are afraid that if they simplify some things, that they will lose some kind of credibility or context.
I thought so too.
And I think also for us as scientists, we need to remember that it's not always a bad thing. If we don't mention some tiny specifics, it's not going to completely misrepresent the data we're trying to explain or the facts that we're trying to deliver. So for scientists also, maybe trying to change their mindset a little bit. It's okay. It's okay not to say everything.
Right. Yeah, I think this is kind of an old school way of thinking, because in the older times, prestige was very important. Right. And this is something that still exists in the academic world. People don't want to lose their prestige, their credibility.
That was the elitist thing we were talking about at that time.
Yes, right. It's it's also slightly different. I think the prestige and it makes you feel, or you think you appear to the people as the one who knows everything if you start stating complicated words the one after the other, because then they say, okay, this is the person who knows everything about that. And so it's something that younger generations tend to not have that much anymore, but some of them do adopt it because of the senior people who they have as role models. But the elitist thing you mentioned now, Yemi, is more of like in the older times, like much, much older times. Going to the university and even having proper education was something for the rich people.
Right.
And it was something very difficult to enter if you didn't belong
Right.
in aristocracy and where money was.
Right.
While it's not the case in the modern world, like we are not, academia is not an elite. If somebody wants to do research, they come to the university. In most countries, not everywhere, unfortunately, but in most countries, universities are free. You can go and do your bachelor studies. And if you enjoy that, it's not all that difficult to go into the academia. The difficult part is staying and surviving in the long run. That's a totally different story. That's very difficult to like survive in academia. But yeah, no, I don't think that it's an elite world. Maybe that's a misconception that has survived since the older times.
Right. Well, it's also possible. Yeah. So I want to move away from the balancing and ensuring maintaining scientific accuracy and accessibility to measuring impact. You know, you've been in the Science Basement Project, and you've been talking to junior researchers and senior researchers about their research and all of that. I want to kind of like talk about what are the feedbacks that you've been able to get. How do you measure your data, or do you have measuring mechanisms in place that you use, that you are willing to share with our audience?
The challenge that we usually get when it comes to science communication, I'm pretty sure that any content creator will relate to. It's how difficult it is to get some feedback from the audience. So I would say the best.
Well, why is that though?
Well, you tell me.
We wish we knew, because
part
then
of
we
the
will
audience,
find.
yes.
Yeah, if we knew, we will find
because
ways to do.
Yeah, because I think
overcome
it's the joy of every creator, whether it's research you're doing, or it's a product you're trying to bring to the market, or it's services you're providing. I think it's the joy of anyone who is in that provisional space to kind of like get feedbacks on some of the, because it helps to improve.
Absolutely.
We would like to encourage everybody to comment and tell us what they think, because that's also, in a way, for us, a way to grow. Because what if we miscommunicated something? There were something still that people didn't understand. That the best way is to just write a comment, or, I don't know, email, or any other way. Like, there are lots of ways to do this, and just let us know. Well, I would say that these are the challenges that are more common in blogging or podcasting, where you don't necessarily have a direct communication with the audience. The best way and the easiest way to get the immediate feedback from the audience is through public speaking. And we have, for example, in the Science Basement afternoons team, which are basically public speaking and talks. Well, now in Audi Library, where people have their own real-time audience, and they give slides and presentations and a discussion for an hour. This is the perfect opportunity also to get lots of questions and get some feedbacks.
I remember before I joined the Science Basement as a podcast host, I gave myself a stage presentation on my research together with two colleagues of mine, and there was a little boy in the audience, and in the end we always have this Q&A section, and he asked very, very interesting questions in this very lovely way that kids ask questions, and it was so nice. And Anastasiia is right. It's like when you are live on a stage and you have the Q&A session, or people will come afterwards to talk to you, you get the feedback because their interest and their clapping is kind of a congratulations or an approval, like you did a good job. And if they come to talk to you or if they ask questions, it's the same. With podcasts, I think one way to know if we are doing well or not is by likes we might get on podcast episodes, and also by more people then subscribing to our social media channels, because that shows that the more people who subscribe, then we've reached more people and they got intrigued and they want to stay in touch or keep in touch and learn what we will do next. So but it is very hard to get feedback.
I would add for the podcast also maybe a technical term, audience retention.
Right.
It's how long people are actually staying to listen till the end.
Right.
And like one thing is when you give somebody a chance to speak, and the other thing when you actually finish listening to the entire thing. And if you are boring, obviously they will not stick for a very long time.
Right.
So that can give you a very good
That's
clue.
the very painful feedback, though.
Yes. And then but the worst thing is like you can't really ask, like, what did I do wrong?
Right.
Tell me. Like
Yeah.
I want to improve. Just tell me what I can do better.
Right. This is interesting because I think now that we're talking about audience retention and all of these things, it kind of like it's moving our conversations towards the media and the technology at this point. Because at first I wanted to kind of like get if there are experiences you might want to share about some of the positive impacts that you have particularly experienced or your project has had on individuals and communities. But then again, we understand the fact that there are a lot of challenges in many ways as far as science communication is concerned. But with the advent of various communication technologies that we have now and all kinds of media platforms out there, so how are science basement and the science communication mission, how has it evolved over the years that you have been in this space?
Yeah, do you want to start?
Well, I will start by saying quite a lot. I think at the beginning we mainly used Facebook as a platform. Then we expanded on Instagram, and we started being more systematic and adding more visuals, especially with the podcast. Anastasiia, I have to praise her. She has done an excellent job. Yeah. And we have to say the truth, like trying to engage with the audience and posting on Instagram. The way we reach people has changed. At first, there was the podcast and the stage presentations or talks. Later on, we had the blog series. We built a very nice website. So it's a constantly evolving way of trying to make our space or online presence more beautiful and stronger. And it has helped.
This is what I want Anastasiia to respond to. Not this, but which platforms have you guys kind of like found more useful to your projects the more? Because I know that there are a lot of platforms out there right now, but which
I mean, social media platforms specifically.
Yeah, social media platforms that you've really found valuable.
We've mainly been doing Instagram and Twitter. And I would say that for topics like for the main podcast series that we have that are just people telling about their own research, Instagram is a better one. But for the academia-related topics, Twitter was more responsive for us.
Oh, okay.
Because, there is academic Twitter, like even a hashtag. Okay. And academics really like to post their own papers there, even like before they fully released in the journals. And they also like to post questions or some problems that they've encountered. So that's a very good platform for that. But for just any like normal communication of science, like some fun facts about science, I think Instagram is a very good one.
Right. Okay. So I want to take us to the kind of advice that both of you, and each one of you would, of course, give what you would consider as advice for aspiring science communicators. What would be your advice to students and early career researchers who are interested in improving their science communication skills? I'm going to start with Eleanna.
Well, I think first and foremost, I would say it's fun. So if you engage with science communication, you can have a lot of fun. So that would be the first thing I would like to say. And then something to encourage people to engage, or scientists to engage more with science communication, is that you can improve also your skills in presenting. And therefore, when then you go to a conference to present your research to the scientific community, you have developed skills, soft skills, that you don't necessarily develop otherwise. So I would stick with this too. I'm curious to hear
What about you, Anastasiia?
Yeah, mine would be to start. And I think oftentimes with any new project that people take, it may be the most daunting thing to do. Because there might be an idea, but actually putting it into reality, can be very intimidating. I would say there's nothing intimidating in that. Just overcoming this initial fear. That's something I would like to encourage people to do. And I also very often hear an excuse like, I don't really have time to do this. And I think the Science Basement actually proves that, well, you do. Because there are platforms like our platform, which allows you to do it really at your leisure. You don't necessarily have to publish a very lengthy, super professional blog on your very first go. You can start by doing very small tasks. So you can write a small little column, make small posts on Instagram or Twitter, and that could be already the first step. And once you gain the small experience, or better if you get also the feedback on that, then you can keep on developing and making bigger projects.
Right. So, are there resources, workshops, or training programs that are run by Science Basement that maybe you can recommend for anyone passionate or interested in science communication?
I think, Anastasiia, you are the best to answer that question.
Don't doubt yourself, Eleanna. Believe in yourself. I would say there are all sorts of flavors for people to choose from. It can be podcasts. It can be writing a blog. It can be afternoon talks. If you would like to communicate with kids, which I consider like the ultimate form of science communication, then there's also Youth and Science Club. We have even comics that started. So there is really no borders. And the unique thing about the Science Basement is that we are pretty much open to new projects. So if you have any new ideas, just suggest it to us and we'll be interested in considering. So we don't 100% guarantee, but we will at least try our best to see how we can implement this as a project of its own or as a part of some other project.
Right.
And the blog series, for example, they have the writing workshops. So you can join if you wanted to try blogging, you don't need to set up your own blog. You can just join the Science Basement blogging team, and they have the writing workshop. In the podcast, we have audio editing workshop, and I expect there will be more of those in the future. So there's definitely a lot of possibilities to get the soft skills, but also to, in practice, try something and see if you like it and want to continue with it.
Right. So this is going to be my final questions to both of you. It's just a single question, but it would be nice to kind of like get your insights into different containers. I like to ask people about what they see in the future. How they envision the future of whatever projects that they are working on. What do you envision as the future of science communication, and how do you sort of think it would evolve further?
That's an interesting question. I think I see there's a lot of room for more and more people to engage with it. We've seen that before, science communication was considered more of a hobby that some scientists do on the side of the research career. But nowadays, it has become also an outlet for many creative people who might not have a sustainable career in academia. Then they could pursue a career in science communication and scientific journalism. So I think there is a lot of room for people to grow, develop soft skills, and I hope that more and more scientists will see the value of being involved in science communication, because you don't necessarily have to be in front of a camera. You could as well be in the background, like editing or maintaining. So it's not only about you being the face doing the science communication. You can provide material or support that is needed, and we certainly need hands and voices. So I hope more people will get involved.
Hands and voices. What about you, Anastasiia?
I'd like to quote David Lynch here.
Okay, let's go.
I'm wearing the glasses today because I'm seeing the future, and the future is looking very bright. And I would say that's the future of the science communication. I believe that more and more people are recognizing its importance, and scientists, non-scientists, there is very large interest in understanding scientific facts. And if anything, the importance of this is going to just go much higher. And there are more courses and platforms emerging that are teaching science communication and that are providing opportunities for science communicators. So yeah, I think it's just going to be bigger. And if anything, maybe scientists and non-scientists will understand each other much better.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that comes to the end of our conversation today, because I also share that sort of positive outlook on science communication. And I want to thank you for coming around to ThinkPod and for sharing your knowledge and your insights with our audience. And we want to wish you the best with your science projects, science communication projects. And I think it's something that should spark the interest of not only the science community, but the public as well, who are beneficiaries of the findings that we kind of churn out from the science community. So once again, thank you so much for being a beacon of hope for many who are looking at you for some of the beautiful things that is about to come from science projects.
And thank you for having us here today and providing this amazing opportunity to speak out, basically.
Indeed,
It's a pleasure. To our audience, I hope you have had a great time with this conversation, and we surely hope that you have learned one or two things. If you're passionate about science communication, you can check out the sciencebasement.org. You will find more information about the projects that Dr. Eleanna and Anastasiia have been doing in science communication. And until the next time when we meet, please like, subscribe, and please leave us with your comments. We would value the feedbacks that we get so that we can keep bringing you more content from the heart of Helsinki. See you next time.